Hey friends, Wandering Pastor out here with a question for you. Have you ever thought about idolatry? You might think, idolatry? What? I mean, isn't that old stuff where ancient people bowed down to statues? And sure, that was idolatry, but I think there's an idolatry that is still going on today, and I think it's maybe even more pervasive today, especially in America or in the Western cultures. Idolatry is really anything that you put in place of God, anything that you give God's rightful place to. So for you, it might be a value, it might be a goal, it might be a person, it might be a relationship, it might be a business, something that takes God's rightful place as number one in your life is an idol. And I believe there are a lot of idols that we serve that get in the way of God. And in fact, I wrote my first book this past year called American Idols. And it takes a look at several of the idols that really grab our attention and hold on and get us really going away from what God wants in order to pursue what we want. And essentially, that's what idolatry is. It's me choosing to go my way. And I think there is one idol above all else that is prevalent in the world today, in particular in America today. Do you have any guesses of what they are? What it is? The number one idol in America today. I wonder what you think it might be. Here's what I think it is. I think it's the idol of self. The idol of self takes precedence over everything else. Because the idol of self basically, obviously it puts me on the throne, or you in your life on the throne of everything. So everything you do, everything that is done to you, everything you experience, everything you're expected to do in order to make ends meet, or to do in order to do your part in the family or in the workforce or anything, everything takes a backseat to you, to me, to my desires, my whims, my passions, my appetites, the things I want to do. That all becomes number one. Everything else takes a back seat. And that obviously has implications for every relationship you have, every job you've ever had, every responsibility you've ever had. If self is number one, then everything else falls apart. And that, I think, is part of what we're seeing in our culture today. I mean, it's one thing to talk about self-love or self-image in some innocuous way, but the reality is, if you follow that forward, and if you say you have to love yourself first, as so many people talk so much about, most of us have no problem doing that. We focus on self pretty easily. We did it from the time we were babies, and many of us never got out of it. And in our culture, we kind of encourage that. Self, self, self. Me, me, me. You, you, you. Think about you. And if we do that, and if we continue to live that way, it will continue to be very destructive, in my opinion. In fact, when we put my feelings number one, if my feelings are top notch, guess what? Every relationship I have is going to suffer for that. Every marriage, every parent-child relationship, everything, every friendship, everything's going to suffer for that. If I am number one, every relationship I have will suffer. If my desires are number one, then every responsibility I have will suffer. I will not want to get up and go to work when I'm supposed to because I want to sleep in today. If I am number one, all of these things will take a back seat and they will eventually fall apart. Here's the problem with that. Two things. Number one, we've kind of turned our back. As I said, idolatry is putting something else in God's rightful place. We've turned our back on God. We've turned our back on what He says. We've turned our back on His design for us, which is good and loving. As I've said before, He's our Creator who knows us and loves us and wants the best for us and knows the best for us. But we've turned our back on that, and we've said, no, I know what's best for me. I know I'm going to choose to go my way, not God's way. And as a result of that, not only do our lives begin to fall apart, but our society begins to fall apart. Because if you don't have a one sort of guiding principle, some guardrails to keep your culture on the road, you will eventually go off the road and crash. And that's exactly, I think, what we're doing. Because when we say to ourselves and other people, no, I get to choose for my life. I get to choose what's right and what's wrong. I get to choose what I do on a given day because of my feelings, because of my appetites, because of my desires, because of my emotions, then anything can be changed. Anything can go by the wayside. Anything that even was a bedrock up until just this generation, a bedrock principle, can go away because I have exalted self above everything else. That, I believe, is the number one idol. And it shows up in so many ways. So just consider, just think about people in your life. People in your life who might be more self-centered than other people. Essentially, what's the problem with that? Well, the problem with that is you can't depend on them. The problem with that is they're going to turn every argument or every disagreement around to somehow they're the victim, right? That it's all about them and that you're being mean to them or something like that. People like that. We all do. If our culture is based on that, if our culture lives like that, then what will happen eventually? Eventually, our culture is going to self-destruct because you simply can't have self as number one without leading to eventual disintegration of the social norms, disintegration of the family, disintegration of friendships and work relationships and even the workforce. I mean, that's part of what we're seeing now too. You can't find good workers. You can't find enough workers because people just, you know what? I thought I wanted that job, but I didn't like it yesterday, so I'm not going to go anymore. I mean, that seems ludicrous. We would have thought 10 years ago, 20 years ago, that would have never come across. We had a work ethic. We don't anymore. Why? Because self is number one. And when you put to self number one, it will eventually lead to anarchy. And anarchy will, by definition, in every single case, destroy a civilization. You simply cannot have civilization with anarchy and selfishness at the same time. And so what do we do with that? Well, I mean, especially when we talk about God in the mix, when we start to talk about, what does God want us to do? God wants us to put him first. Put him on the throne, which is where he belongs. He is the creator. He is the one who holds it all together. He's the one who created you and created me. That's God. And if we put him on his rightful throne, then one of the things he does is he says, I want you to trust me to bring about the best in your life as you follow me, as you submit to me, as you worship me, God says, then I will direct your life. As we said yesterday, or one of the days I've been recording, Jesus said in John chapter 10, verse 10, the thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I have come that they might have life and have it to the full. I believe part of the way the thief, that is Satan, steals and kills and destroys is he gets us to put self as number one, and it causes everything else to fall apart. But one of the best ways Jesus leads to life to the full is if we put him in his rightful place, which is on the throne. So think about idolatry. Just maybe you think that's not you. That doesn't apply to you. Just look around. Look around and see the people in your life for whom it's pretty obvious that it does apply to. Look around and see the people in our culture for whom it does apply. It does seem to pretty much apply. And just consider what is the eventual outcome if more and more people go that way versus what is the eventual outcome if more and more people put God on the throne like he belongs. Which is better? I guarantee you know which is better deep down, whether you want to admit it or not. All of creation longs for God to be in his rightful place. And until we get that right, until we change that, and frankly, I don't see that happening. And so I don't see good days ahead unless something changes, because I think we will disintegrate if we continue along this path. That's not great news. That's not a happy-go-lucky message. But the truth is, that's an important thing. We have to get self out of the role that we've put self in. We have to take self off the throne and put God back on the throne and let him have his rightful place and worship him and serve him and obey him and follow him, knowing that he will lead to good direction for our lives. So, something to think about, something to consider. Wandering Pastor saying, peace. Hope you have a good day.